As for the food for the enslaved community itself, there are just a few references. One visitor during the Madison retirement, he noted that the enslaved community are scattered in little settlements over the farm and reside in distinct families and comfortable dwellings. Each family raise their own pigs and poultry, eat meat twice a day, and have meat, vegetables, milk, and fruit without restriction, unquote. Well, I hate to say it, but this idyllic list doesn't square with the Madison's 1790 letter to his overseer, in which he indicates that enslaved men and women and children were receiving regular rations of cow's milk, cornmeal, and salted pork. That seems to be a very regular kind of allotment of cornmeal and salt pork, sometimes milk, sometimes, of course, a little salt, sometimes some molasses. The adult workers in the fall season were often provided beer and whiskey during the harvest as they worked well into the late afternoon and evening. And so, to supplement rations, slaves at Montpelier, as did their peers throughout Virginia, at any plantation that you find notes document of, they kept gardens themselves. So, of course, if the enslaved community had to raise most of their rations, then it means that they had gardens and they had chicken yards, and they could use those chickens or the eggs or the meat to supplement their own diets, to barter or exchange at the store for other items that they wanted, like fabric or buttons or jackknives and all the things that people needed to be able to live at the time. They also might hunt small game. They weren't allowed to have guns, of course, so very clever people knew how to make traps and set traps and attract small wildlife and add that to the dining table. Now, there was a report, as I said earlier, that the Montpelier enslaved community kept pigs as part of their provisionings in their own self-provisionings, but that does not appear to have been true. There's really no evidence, and I don't find evidence at Monticello or any of the other historic houses, partly because owners were concerned, because of the way pigs roamed, that the pigs would get confused, that their pigs would somehow get mixed in with their pigs. But certainly that's not the case. If they were indeed allowed to do such a thing here, it would have been a very, very rare kind of privilege. People were always concerned that the enslaved were going to steal, liberate, borrow foodstuffs from the master class and the storage areas. And so those were always really grave concerns, and a lot of that was the job of the overseer, was to make sure that as little of that happened as possible. So people had to be very self-sufficient, and they had to be able to make do with what they had. And so with their gardens and their chickens and their vegetables and their own learned food ways, they could have a decent enough diet. But that was complemented by the fact that many, certainly here at Montpelier, many people had opportunity at various times to work in the kitchens here for various kinds of events, great big barbecues, times when large numbers of people and their labor were needed to make a large culinary event. And in those circumstances, they gained experience. They gained knowledge of how to cook, how to process, how to feed large groups of people. And again, it's no wonder that after emancipation, so many emancipated African Americans found that they could make a living in some way as cooks in private homes, as cooks in hotels, cooks on the railroad, as cooks in other settings, because they brought with them the knowledge that they learned at places as rural as Montpelier.